My name's Terence English, and I grew up in South Africa. My father had been a mining engineer, and so I thought I'd follow in his footsteps, and I started a mining engineering degree. And in my third year, I thought I might just be a better doctor. And then, fortunately, I inherited £2,000, and so with that in my pocket, I thought, well, I might be enough, and I came to England, and I was accepted at Guy's on the basis that I got my degree in engineering, BSc, and qualified over here. And I started in cardiology, but then morphed into cardiac surgery because I was hugely impressed with the way the thoracic unit at Guy's worked. And that was very fortunate because I've had a very interesting life in cardiac surgery. I ended up at Papworth Hospital in Cambridge, and we started started a program in heart transplantation there, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do the first successful one in August 1979. And since then I've had a wide experience in medical matters. I was, again, to my surprise, ended up as president of the College of Surgeons 3 years. Then I did a brief year as president of the BMA, and then finally ended up as master of St Catherine's College in Cambridge. So it's been an interesting life. You asked me for my views, such as they are, about politics and the delivery of healthcare. And this indeed is something that I've thought about a lot recently. And more and more it's become evident to me that different countries have different politics, and they end up with different methods of healthcare. And you have a very fine system of healthcare in America for the majority of the people, all based on private healthcare and so on. But during my year in Alabama in 1969 as a research fellow, I saw what the bottom end of the society in America got at that time in the way of healthcare, and it was not good at all. But that was because of the politics at the time. The same when I look at my own country that I left many years ago, but I still keep in touch with, South Africa. The impact of the politics on healthcare in South Africa has been huge, both during the apartheid era, when there was provision of very good hospitals, and there was some good provision to healthcare for the black population, but it was never extensive enough. And what has happened since then is very interesting, because South Africa had some excellent university medical schools in Cape Town and Johannesburg at Wits, and indeed the Orange Free State, where they had literally world-class training in medicine, and they had all the specialties represented. First time I heard this was about 4 or 5 years after the new government had come in, and I was talking to the professor of surgery in Cape Town, and they were having terrible problems because a third of the university medical budget had been taken away to provide for healthcare in the rural areas. Now, the object was absolutely fine, but it was crippling the training. And their open heart surgery, they were equipped to do about 20 cases a week. They were down to 4 because they couldn't afford to get the heart-lung machine equipment and so on. So there's another example where, and again in South Africa, where the Minister of Health kept on denying that AIDS was caused by sexual contact and so on, and she didn't want to believe that, and the then president, Thabo Mbeki, didn't want to believe it because he'd looked it all up on the net and found some chap in California who said there was no link between AIDS and the virus and so on. And so for a long time, particularly in the rural areas, in the Transkei and so on, where my godson was working, never had access to antiretrovirals because this was a political thing. So there's another example. In this country, we had a wonderful system after 1948, and based on wonderful principles, but it's come under enormous pressure recently, partly because of the very extensive advances that have been made in medicine and medical technology in my own field, but also, I believe, because of expectation amongst the public that everything should be provided, everything. And I'm not sure that everything can be provided now, because we have to learn how to ration a bit and sensibly, and not just at the low end, but at the high end, perhaps, of technology. In this country, I just don't know. I mean, I've thought about it a lot, and I had huge respect and have huge respect for the National Health Service, and I could not have had it at a better time than I did. And I actually, when I was ready to start the transplant program at Papworth, we'd worked for 5 years on this, and I'd been going to Stanford and learning the techniques there from Norman Shumway, who was always very good to me. And so I don't think he ever believed I was going to do it, but when I visited, he'd be good, show me what they were up to. And when I was ready, I presented our protocols to the Department of Health. And there'd been a moratorium on heart transplantation way back from the beginning of '72, which I wasn't aware of initially. But anyway, I was aware of it then. And I presented our stuff to the Department of Health, protocols, and they asked to see me, and I went to see them and answered questions and so on, and I was very politely received. But then 2 or 3 weeks later, I had a letter from the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Henry Eloise, saying, well, English, we've thought about this, there's no money for a program, and we don't want to see any one-off transplants. So I just thought, well, I'm sorry, Sir Henry, I'm going to do it. And I went to see the chairwoman of the Area Health Authority, and I said, look, what I want is to use our facilities for 2 cases of transplants. And after that, we'll find our own money. And we went ahead, and that was the basis that we went ahead on. And the first one didn't work, and the roof fell in, and the criticism was enormous from the Department of Health, from the public, from the medical profession. But I had one more shot. And we did that some months later, and Keith Castle lived for 5.5 years, and he showed everybody how well a heart transplant could live, and did more for than I ever could. And I mention that because that was a time when consultants actually had that sort of that degree of independence. I mean, I had my knuckles very seriously wrapped, but they didn't fire me. The broader side of politics is what I touched on before, and that is, can we, as a country, actually continue to afford an entirely free National Health Service for the people? And I don't think we can. And the problem is that the politicians have never been prepared to use the dreaded R word, rationing. But I do believe that if we're to continue with being able to provide particularly the lower income group with free medicine, we need to change a little bit. And one way might be that beyond a certain income level, people have to take out insurance so that they then have to pay for their medical treatment. Those below that particular level continue to get it free. And I think that, British public, being what it is, always for fairness and so on, might accept something like that. But it does need some political will to change the view, which I think is a false one, that we can continue to provide all that is now available in medical science to all the people of our country.